TK, good morning.
Good morning, fine sir. How are you?
I am fantabulous. Share with you, and
Uh-oh.
and that is, I'm still trying to figure this out. But I shop on Amazon for a reason, especially all the subscribe and saves. So that way, I change my address on Amazon. All the subscribe and saves should change too, except they don't. They're all about half of them. I got to go contact like all these companies individually and be like, "Oh, hey, I moved." I'm like, "Well, why did I do this through Amazon?" I go, "What the convenience? Like, how does that not get updated to them when I change my address?" So I've got like everything from dog food showing up. so so yeah, yeah. So like the new owners of the house are like, "Hey, we got this big package here for you." Because there's 150 pounds of dog food shows up every 6 weeks. So I'm going, the Amazon you never move.
So there's a schism in the system you're trying to tell me.
There's a glitch.
We need to fix the glitch.
Yeah, yeah. I just haven't been able to figure out, how to fix that glitch just yet. But
That's fine.
it's not how this is supposed to work.
None of it's work this way.
I hope everyone out there that winds up joining in can hear you first time. Mixer. How it works, who knows?
Might have stumbled onto something.
Maybe, or it's gonna be like shit, and no one's gonna.
Or you're gonna have to go back and close caption everything so people.
Yeah, so they can hear it. Like I know they can hear me. It's exactly how well they hear you just yet.
For as long as I did, I know that's what you're worried about is can they hear you?
Oh, I'm not worried about that. The microphone's right here, so we're good. So hopefully those people are listening. We got a couple of folks that'll tell me if they can hear you all right or not, because we know if Stoney's out there, he'll be like texting both of us, be like, I can't hear you, or you're garbled or whatever, because he's good about that.
He's our quality control person.
Yeah, definitely. So today today's topic. I started thinking, and I know you've said it, at least a few times as well as myself, but I'll kind of paraphrase in that you can't control what someone else is say or going to do, but you can control your reaction to it.
Correct.
And this came about, and when people talking about, oh well, this triggered me, and whether it be because they saw a picture of something, as an example, oh, I saw your police uniform, therefore I'm triggered, or something that is a Hollywood stereotype, and someone said something, and now all of a sudden, oh, I'm upset, and I go, so what you're saying is you no longer have the ability to control the dominion over yourself. And I just go, why don't power for you?
I number one, I think in large measure we're teaching that, right? If you make emotions and feelings supremacy in the public space, then facts and logic go out the window, right? And if you want to create a place where, in largely you won't have a one-way narrative, right? Then you make certain things, unpalatable to people. But I think it goes back to this. Any discussion you have about it comes back to free speech, right? Um, Nothing. There's two things. If somebody says something that's completely distasteful, even if it's racist, homophobic, everything, that you would probably, would never come out of collectively our mouths or anything like that. What you're doing is like, okay, cool. Now I know who you are, right? Don't stifle that. It's like I always say, like, put the KKK on television every day of the week, because the more they talk, the more everybody goes, well, that's just not correct, right? That's abhorrent, and we need to push that as far off the mainstream as humanly possible, right? But when you get to a point where it's used to stifle dissent, right? That's really where it is. And you get, like I said, emotions are very easy to manipulate in the public space, especially with large groups of people. That if you want to have a one-way discussion, right, then great. Because the hard thing with free speech is you have to listen to things that you find unpalatable, right? And the scientific community is great about this. Best idea wins, right? Supposedly, right? I mean, that's before you put the economics in it, and we're trying to take a product to market and all these other things, right? But in pure scientific terms, right, the best idea should win. So engineers are really tough on each other when they're talking about their ideas, and you kind of have to leave your feelings at the door. In fact, like years ago, Jason was showing an idea that was in beta to the leadership of the company we both worked for. One of his college classmates, in fact, his college roommate, worked at the company as well as an engineer, and he came in the room. Well, he got in 5 minutes late, and he didn't hear that, hey, this is maybe an alpha beta product. This is what I'm working on. This is where we're going. Well, he starts poking holes in it, like just basically not understanding who's in the room, and is wearing him out like they're having an engineering discussion in the lab. And finally, like, my boss was like, hey, go over there and choke that dude out. Right. And I went over and I'm like, hey, dude, this is a beta pro. Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, Jay, I'm really sorry. Like, and he completely backed down. Jason wasn't triggered by it or anything like that. He found that, hey, you're right. This is not the time and place for this, but I understand where we're at. And I really like where you're going with some of your ideas. All right. When you start to remove that you're never going to remove it from like that engineering, because that's how we're going to make great advancements. But really, I think what you're talking about is we remove it from the social dynamic, right? That that if I don't want to hear something, right, then I shouldn't have to hear it, right? You don't have the right as a human not to be offended. I truly believe that, right? Because in that offense, it makes you think differently. Now, you can be uncomfortable with it, right, and everything else. But for the most part, I think you hear in the public space today, when we talk about people getting triggered, is the people that are saying they're triggered. They want one path of speech. They want one dominant paradigm of how we want to move forward. And if you say anything that's outside of that, then we're going to use that to emotionally separate you from the herd. And I think that's the big problem is. We start, whether it's with science, global, climate change now, we don't call it global warming anymore. With climate change and everything like that, in most circles now, especially in the media, you're not even allowed to have an argument or a discussion about, hey, how we get from A to B. If it's not spend every dollar we can scrape off the table to go to zero emissions as fast as we can, the fact that as a nation we're on a glide slope to be green faster than most every other country on earth, especially with the size of the US, then we don't want to have that discussion, right? We want to have, and that's it's about stifling dissent more than it is about people being triggered, right? Or not owning yourself, right? And I think that's the other thing is I don't want to own myself. I don't want to own my emotions. So if I get triggered, then I'm taking and I'm transferring that to you, that you're responsible for my emotional state. That's the bigger problem.
I think that
not making kids responsible for their emotional state is very damaging for them as they become young adults.
Absolutely, and I think that's a big part. So, outside of like the engineers, this is what I coach people on. You should always have a poker face as an executive. You shouldn't let someone know that what someone said or did got to you, because a big part of this is like, okay, so let's say I decided to be the evil Dr. Ford, and then for certain people that this happens. If I know I can say something and it gets you and it gets you upset, and I know it, and we're not collegial because maybe you've thrown me under a bus a couple of times or whatever, and now I find this and I've got that weakness of yours, I will own you in public. You can say whatever, but I'll say those things in a way in which everyone else around is going to be like, I don't understand. And you've blown up. Well, guess what? You're you're the person that everyone's going to go, I don't want to work with that person, whoever it is. And I've got this lady at work, and she's going to be very, very good. And she'll call me up because certain people kind of rattle her, and she's like, I let this person get to me. And she's like, I don't understand, how to get around it. And I was like, look, it takes some time, but when you get upset, the faster you realize you're upset, the better. But then how you take control over the conversation and how you bring the power back to you is go, hey, Jim, I hear you. It's not really we have a short time and we're all in meetings all the time. I will after this, we can go over it. Now, if Jim keeps going, he's the jerk. But you telling him isn't the right time or place, and I let you know when we're going to talk about it in a way.
Right. I'm going to own that time.
Right?
Yeah.
You've taken back power, and it's that simple. And then if that person keeps going, you go, hey, Jim, I told you, we'll talk about this offline. And then people are eventually going to go, Jim, shut up. Like, we got a meeting, right? You've done. And so, yeah, we are humans and we are emotional creatures. But don't let someone know. Like, you've got an inner circle of people. You can be completely vulnerable with your inner circle, or at least hopefully you are.
Right.
But not everyone deserves to know what that circle is, or even everything about you.
Right. Or
Don't.
even if they're in it, right?
Yeah, right.
I think one of the things about the SEAL community that's funny is, gets everybody to burrow in on that immediately. So you develop this mechanism really early on of, like, I don't care what gets you set off and make mad, or gets you out of there. You don't ever, ever, ever let anybody know it bothers you, because then it's unrelenting 24/7 until you exhibit enough thick skin that they like, okay, cool, he's over that. Now we got to find the next thing.
Yeah, well, it's really funny because somebody in a meeting, essentially, he was working on something, and one of the ladies, went to say something, and he just went. And so she's telling me about it, and I'm like laughing. I'm like, why? And she's very, very upset. And so now every time I see her, as soon as she starts to talk, I go, shh. I'm like, every time she's like, I'm going to kill you. I said, that's the reaction you kind of have to have. Don't, you off a duck's back, let it just keep going. Don't let that person know. And I'm going to keep doing this to you until now. When this happens again, your reaction should be, when someone does it, is to laugh.
Right.
And then
they're not doing it to shut you up. They're doing it to elicit a reaction.
Right. I mean, let's say it was unintentional, regardless. Now all of a sudden you burst out laughing when someone does it. It's going to call attention, and they're going to go, and they're going to say, "What?" I'm like, and then you go, like, you can say, "You seriously just shushed me in a meeting like this? What's wrong with you?" like laugh, and then, because that's going to get like now. Because I think what will, when those kind of instances, I change that person's behavior, because you don't want to look bad in front of all your peers. Now all of a sudden you're like, oh, I did. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That person will never do it again if you just burst out laughing. I think that's my opinion.
I think one of the things, and it's part of lately, this kind of the social experiment that we're going through with who gets to have the microphone in the public domain, right?
Me, it's right here.
When I it's like I don't even get mad about it. It's just like in every walk of life, when you start stifling dissent and curating what can be, what level of dissent we can have with things, nothing good has ever happened.
Well,
Nothing.
innovation can't happen without conflict.
Right, and whether it's political innovation, engineering innovation, relationship innovation, all of the things, right? We tend to focus on what we see on television every week, and people at either end of the spectrum shouting at each other. But I think we would agree that university campuses today do not value, for the most part, free speech. Right? They value there's a block of topics we can talk about, and if you don't, it's the same thing. I mean, Dave Chappelle got on and he was talking about LGBT, and if you listen to the first 2 or 3 minutes of it, you're like, he's like going off the rails, right? If you listen to the whole thing, really what it was a tribute to a friend of his who was trans, LGBT, I don't know, like her status, right? Or their status. But at the end of it, she killed herself, right? Got up on a building and jumped off the building, or killed herself. His statement was, I know she's a man because no woman would do that, right? He's being cathartic about it. And there was a Netflix special, and some trans person at Netflix is like, don't get them off. They're not thinking, it's like, you're not listening to the whole frame. And it's like, okay, you're not on the approved list of people that can talk about it, apparently, Dave Chappelle. Right? That's the thing. He's very heartfelt in a comedian. He's a comedian and this is, I think, one of the big things. You listen to most comedians, especially the ones that are, have always kind of ridden that edge of the third rail of things we don't want to talk about in the U.S. anymore, is like, hey, you can't go on college campuses anymore. Right? Why? Because now they've got safe spaces where we can just show up, and anything we don't want to hear or we don't want to acknowledge, you're not allowed to talk about it because it's my personal safe space. Well, I think part of higher education is to prepare you for the world, right? And if significant portions of what people say put you in a position where you can't function, then you're not being set up for success in the real world, right? And I think that's the bigger problem, right? Because dissent is essential to grow. It literally is the food that makes the tree of what we do grow, right? And if we're not going to do that, or if we are going to say, hey, only this, here's the list of things we can talk about. If you look through history, once you're saying, hey, everything else over is off limits, and you basically, and I hate this word, but it's a word people get. If you disenfranchise a significant portion of the population, right, then here's the thing. One of the things that goes on now is you can love, you can hate. Right? I get the polarization of that guy, right? I totally understand it. But a significant portion of the population of this country voted for that guy. And if now that you're getting your way, the other side is getting their way, but to basically disenfranchise that group of people, you're not trying to bring them in, right? You're not saying, hey, let's work together on things. Now it's like, hey, I just need to have one more vote than you, because then I can jam everything I want to do down your throat, right? And we've talked about this before, whether it was, Reagan and Tip O'Neill, Clinton and Newt Gingrich, the lawmakers of this country, the legislators of this country, the executive branch have over the years worked together to get things done that the intent was to help the American people. It was never say, hey, I'm going to jam my way of thinking down your throat. And it could be either side of the aisle, right? Because if in 22, the other side gets it, how are they going to behave? Right? That's the thing. And if you don't like, if in your defense of, I want to be in my own sphere of getting my own way, because that's really what this triggering stuff is about, is I want my own way. I don't want any adverse thoughts in my head. I want everybody to cater to me, right? And if you're in that group of people right now that feels like you're being put upon and you're not getting your way, how do you act? How do you behave once you have the opportunity to lead again, to have your voice, to basically, in this case, I have one more vote than you do, and I can do whatever I want. How do you do that? Do you do it with grace, or do you do it with, you can't talk about this, you can't bring this up, and you can't? And now it doesn't matter where it is, whether you're in a business, a relationship, it's interpersonal relationship, or you're in a store. Like, how many times now do you see people just go off in stores screaming at people that, like, you're going to yell at the cashier for a policy, right? Whole mask thing. Like, did I want to wear a mask in a store? No, I didn't. But you know why I did? Because I like mom and pop restaurants, and I don't want the food service police to show up and put people out of business that are just trying to make a living with 10 employees.
Right. It's interesting is one, without conflict, without struggle, nothing happens. Good wine only occurs when the grapes struggle.
Yeah. Well, there's a T.D. Jakes. He's an evangelist guy. His thing, but he's got a great book called The Crushing. Yeah. Right. And I love the title solely because it's like, hey, in order to make wine, you have to crush the grapes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And let's say, right now it's Squattober for those of you that are interested in that kind of thing. And squats are the perfect metaphor for life. Stuff's going to weigh you down. You're going to go down. How do I stand back up? How do I deal with the struggle? All right. And
we talked about this. I've had 6 knee surgeries. I'm not doing any squats. It's not happening.
I'm just saying,
I know. I just do other things for my legs that that make it to where I can.
The thing is, like, there's going to be struggle everywhere, and you want to get stronger physically. You're going to lift heavy stuff. You're going to run. You are going to do things that challenge your body. So say that you want to get stronger mentally. You also have to do things that challenge you and make you struggle with things. And in most cases, it's listening to people whose opinion you disagree with.
Absolutely. And
right?
and this is the thing where I think really when we start moving to the political side, and actually not just political, I think in society in general, one of the biggest issues that I have with social media is that everyone is looking for the soundbite. Whether it be Ted Cruz, Dan Crenshaw, AOC, they're all doing things for the soundbite.
Correct.
And I feel that is really what's unfortunate. And that's a big reason why, as soon as you get that one more vote, everyone's jamming it down your throat because, hey, I got the sound bites. I now get to control the sound bites.
Control the narrative, right? And that's, what level of grace, it's the old thing. It's like, life is easy when you have everything. Life is really hard when you have nothing or you're down, right? And so once you go through struggle, right, which I think is necessary, once you go through struggle and you come out, now you have the bully pulpit, so to speak. Do you do it with gravitas and grace, or do you kick people when they're down? Right, and that is, I've got my one more vote, so you don't matter, right? And you can't, and I don't care whether it's at work or whatever. You can't alienate people because they don't dress the same way you do. They don't all those other things, right? And the minute you start doing that, if you're a business owner, it's going to fail.
Yeah, here's a great example as to why being comfortable would get you killed. Take any predator that's been in the zoo and go put it back in the wild.
Oh yeah. What's the old adage? The time to go kill a crocodile is right after they've eaten.
Yeah.
Because they almost go into a trance while they digest. They're comfortable. They're satiated. Right? And I think, and when you have people, now that, we brought this up, like, I think when folks are in a position where they're very uncomfortable, where they're struggling, right? Because that's where they're having that struggle. And people start in on them, not necessarily with just trigger words, but people that want to keep, kind of poking the bear, then they're surprised when they come out of the corner swinging, right? Whether it's mental health issues, I don't have a job, all these things, right? And, and it doesn't have to be a direct thing, hey, directly about what they feel badly about or what they're struggling with. It's that adjacent thing that shows up, and all of a sudden they come out swinging, and the response does not appear to be proportional to the input. right? And I think like you say, you're like, hey, if somebody starts in on me, I'm going nuclear immediately. I'm not graduating this thing. I'm coming back. You want to bring a knife. I'm going to bring a low grade nuke, right?
Right.
And I'm going to solve the problem, right? But I think one of the I think today, and especially after having locked America up for 400 plus days in a lot of cases, where people after a year were like, okay, I feel comfortable enough to start traveling again, right? And getting people out and about, but this kind of separating humans from other humans is highly detrimental, right? And I think even now you're going to see there's going to be a lot more of those disproportionate responses because people have been struggling, right? And we as a nation ignore a lot of mental health issues, and I think you need to help people get stronger, right? Mentally, physically. I think you need to help people get stronger to handle those emotional responses, right? And understand why, right? Now, I also say this: I can be right if you disagree with something, I can be correct, but I also can have said it in a way that if I'm not trying to understand who you are as a person, that it's going to set you off, right? Do I have to own some of that? It depends on our relationship, right? But when you start talking like in the public domain, they're putting it out there to be as inflammatory as possible, and it's like, hey, I want to have a negative response from the other side in such a way because I want the sound.
Right, and it keeps them in the news cycle. The one part, when we were talking, I always, when I choose to act, I choose to use the nuclear option every time. But and that's only after I have tried to de-escalate several times, and I'm like, okay, well, guess what?
Apparently, my volume is low.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, it's just Stony. Who cares? Let's see. I gotta play around with this thing here.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. Hopefully that will make it better. We'll find out. It's probably gonna be blasting in my headphones, but
Okay.
for Stony, we'll do whatever. We'll see if that's any better. How's that sounding there, Stony? We turned TK up a little bit. We'll find out.
I'm not typing yet, so it must be okay.
Yeah. Well, when you start talking, I mean, it's hard. Like, he barely has opposable thumbs.
You're gonna trigger him. You're gonna trigger him. That's all.
Well, TK needs to be heard.
Amen, brother. Praise the Lord, sweet baby Jesus.
Yeah. It's quite overall interesting with that aspect of people. That they want to get a reaction. Why give them what they want? That's just the part that I just go, all right, you want that you want this kind of reaction? I'm just not going to give it to you. As a matter of fact, I'll give you the opposite. You wanted to upset me, so I'm going to laugh at you.
Right.
And it's, I mean, it took years to be able to develop that kind of an aspect, but I wouldn't say it's that much. The biggest part of that is I just go, no one has higher expectations for myself than me. Right. So if you say something, I may consider it. Like if you were to say something to me, because we're close, I'm like, all right, I'm going to consider what TK has to say.
Right.
If I don't know you, I'm not even think about it.
What it comes down to is you can parsec that because you understand my intent because of the relationship we have.
Yeah.
Right. And so that goes a long way towards it, right? And I think in the bigger picture, Thomas Jefferson said, "My disagreements with another man has never been an instance to hate them," right? And I think today it's, hey, if you disagree with somebody, it's either the switch is either on or off. Right? If I don't enjoy what you say, or we don't vote for the same political candidate, or we don't go to the same church, all of those things, right? I can't be friends with you. right? Or any of those things that will allow people to say, give somebody a reason, right? Which, and I almost would like to use the word excuse to go, I'm just going to ignore that person, right? Here's the thing, like when people dissent, I mean, I like it, right? And the guys that work in me like that, I'm like, hey, if I ask a question like, why are we doing something this way, and the answer is, if I say, hey, I want to do something and it's not a good idea, I want somebody to go, hey, that's dumb, right? And then tell me why. Right? Don't just say it's dumb. Like, because I think that's a lot of times is we shut people down. Right? We say, oh, that's stupid. It puts somebody in a negative frame of mind, and then we don't come back and explain why we don't think that's the correct course of action.
It's interesting you say that, because this is the devious part of me, especially at work with people that work with me all the time. I will say things that I know to be intentionally wrong, like it's false, like it's just not true.
Yeah.
To see if anyone will correct me.
Someone comes up from the west.
All right, exactly. Yeah. I want to see, are you going to tell me I'm wrong? And that tells me very quickly whether or not you can be at least in a corporate sense, in that circle of mine.
Right.
Because if you're not willing to tell me I'm wrong, then, especially when I know the answer of what I just said was not true.
Yeah. The OFF button applies power.
Right.
No, I think it's the ON button. I just want to hear that from one person.
Yeah. and so if that's the case, I go, all right, well, this person is not going to be part of that 50% that gets stuff done. It's going to be a part of the 50% that does little. Yeah. So,
which side of Pierce's law they sit on?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking for. I need that.
Yeah.
But going back to that aspect of the triggering, I just go, work on it. Do not let anyone know that it's upset. Do you think I just go right back to it. Do you think the lion cares that the sheep doesn't like it? No.
Like the old meme, it's like, shark's a shark. It gets up on Monday, it starts eating stuff, being a shark, right? It's
right.
Jumping on things and going after it.
I pretty much think that you only have 3 ways you can walk in life. You can walk around like you are the king or queen. Right. You can walk around like you don't care who the effing king is.
Yep.
Or you can keep your head down. The only 2 that are options are the first 2. The last one should never be the option.
Right, exactly.
Right? And I don't care which one of the other 2 it is, but that should be it. Because if you are the king, you don't care what anyone has to say about you.
Right. No, actually, I think it's fine. If you're the king, you consider what people say. You care what people say, but you're free to act in ways that people that don't want that level of responsibility, right? Because that's really what it is. It's a level of responsibility. When you're saying, I want to be the supreme decider, right? Is really what you're saying. I
didn't want to be the supreme decider. It's just a burden for me because
yeah, I didn't choose the life. The life chose me.
Yeah.
Right? But that's here's the thing. We use these words triggered now and everything like that. And it's just, in my mind, for the most part, it's just to stifle dissent.
It is. Right? And this is like the same.
But there's ways to talk to people. And I think we're in business in particular, we're kind of like getting ready to go over this hump. And it's the generation of leaders before us that, and we fall into this, I know I do anyway, where when you were growing up, you were taught to, because it was before the internet, right? And I think the internet is driven a big change, not only in business, but in socially, how we interact and everything like that. Because there's things that people will say to other people on social media platforms you'd never say to me in person, right? Because it's an uncomfortable dynamic, right? And there's energy that's given off. Well, Twitter's a dead thing. There's no energy there, right? Now you can get crazy and black, and it's like, I love the whole concept of, this cancel culture where you don't like what I say, you're just going to basically mute me and get me out of your life. Well, do you think, I think the problem in anything is when people stand around, especially leaders, and all they get is, hey, you're doing a great job, boss. Hey, you're doing a great job. Well, the generation of leaders that are kind of getting to the point where they're getting retired, they grew up even more than I did. That, hey, you people did what the boss said because he was the boss, right? And it was that more 50s mentality and coming out of that. Now, as a leader, you have to have your ear to the ground, right? And you have to be cognizant of your surroundings in a way you never have. And if you say, hey, folks are coming out of school now and they're growing up, like, I love this, like, I can't work with 20, 30-year-olds. They'll retire, right? Because there are an unbelievable amount of amazing young folks they're coming into the workforce, right? But they don't respond and react to things the way we used to, because their life experience is demonstrably different than ours was, right? How do you get to them with empathy and accountability so that you're not, like, you can have those conversations of, I disagree, right? And you want them to be able to say to you, I disagree, because that's how that two-way street starts. It's not a one-way street where I walk in the room as the leader and say, as the manager, right? Because this is manager behavior, not leader behavior. Hey, we're doing it this way. Well, hey, I think we're gonna, like, get run over in the middle of the road if we do it that way. Yeah, I don't care. If that happens, we'll deal with it when it happens, right? And instead of going, hold on a second, wait a second, I'm hearing there could be a really big problem. What's your opinion on why that is, right? That's where I think we have a lot, and that goes into social out in the thing. And it's like, we're telling people that, hey, if you disagree with somebody, it's all right just to get them out of your life, right? It's not. It's okay to not agree with somebody and still be their friend. It's very difficult in relationships to do that, right? Yeah. Whether it's, like, it doesn't have to just be like romantic relationship, but in, like, where you're close friends with somebody and it's like all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, I never knew that person felt that way about that, right? And can I live with that, right? Those are the hard ones, and those are the ones where now, as we kind of, like, as we snowball down with this social media behavior in life, where I'm just not going to talk to you anymore, right? There's people that I'll always talk to, right? But I won't be the one to reach out anymore. Right? It has nothing to do with disagreements. It has nothing to do with getting triggered. It has to do with every time I talk to you, like, I have a buddy of mine, I'm not going to say his name because the team guys listen to know who I'm talking about, but every time I answer the phone with him now, I'm like, what do you need? He's like, why does it have to be that way? It's the only time you ever call. Right? And you're like, why do you have to be a dick about it? I'm like, I'm not. I'm like, this, I don't have time to deal with that type of relationship anymore. Right? If your nickname should be one way, we're not going to hang out together. It doesn't mean I don't like you. It doesn't mean I don't respect. It doesn't mean I want bad things to happen to you or your family, right? But it's just, like, this past week, and it's just that, it makes me cry for the nation. It comes out that Governor DeSantis' wife has cancer, and there's a huge preponderance of people going, good, it serves her right for marrying you, for being, like, thing. It's like, you've lost your mind. Another human being is having an assault on their body in a way that no one would ever want. And your first reaction is, because you disagree with their politics, you're happy that she's got cancer.
This is what's easy to me. One of the things I think, and I may, maybe just because I'm blind or not looking for it, but I don't know anyone that is on the conservative side that is wishing harm to Biden or his wife, or hopefully I say, Kamala Harris, because all these people are saying you're saying it wrong. I have no idea. If I'm saying it right or wrong.
The vice president.
Right, the vice president.
Right.
I don't want to see her harmed, or her husband, or any of them. No, I just don't like their politics. I don't want to see death come to anyone.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like I said, I think it's more pronounced. Like, and here's the thing, it's kind of hard to, one way or the other, to parsec who's doing what now, because it's crazy. It's Looney Tunes time. But yeah, anybody, I don't care. Like, if you're part of that, if you identify with one political party over another, and you think whatever somebody on your side says is correct, like, if we're advocating to burn books, stifle free conversation, and we're wishing death on other people, if you go look throughout history, that never works out well.
No, even AOC and all these people are going, oh, she was a bartender. Well, you know what? Good for her for going and working through and figuring out how to get elected. You can't. You're no dummy to get elected in the Congress. Like no one, in order to figure out how I could go from bartender to being the congresswoman, like
politically smart, right? If you don't have to be super genius on any particular subject. You don't have to have been a great technologist, business leader, but in today's world. What's the level of compromise you're willing to accept to get that job? Right? Because that's really what politics is about now. Is
unfortunately.
What's that? But
unfortunately.
It said, and so whether it's her or any of the other 434 members in Congress, is what level, and you think like today, being a senator is fairly good because you got 6 years on the job. You really only, you're raising money, you're doing things, but you're not in this big, constant thing. You get elected, you can have a week or two to legislate, right? And you've got time, right? Now, how you get yourself out in the public space and keep people reminded of you is more important now than it's ever been. But you can breathe. The day somebody gets elected to the House, they've got to start running again, right? Because 2020 seems like it's 100 years ago, and 2022 is right around the bend.
Yep.
Right, and so they've got to be constantly running. That's a laborious task, right? And we don't ask people to be considered in their legislative opinion anymore, or anything like that. We want to score points.
Yep.
Right, and I think that's driven by the news media because that it's like the weather. Like every weather person wants to be a weather person in Florida, the Virginia Mid-Atlantic, or in the Northeast. Why? Because it's volatile weather. Like they have a lot to talk about because things go mental with weather here. All right. Easiest job on planet Earth is being a weather person in San Diego.
Yeah.
Yep, it's gonna be 70 degrees again today. Boom. The weather goes on for I don't remember growing up in New England, even here, during hurricane season. The weather dominates the news cycle.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Out in San Diego, it's like how quickly we get that guy. How quickly we get that guy or girl off the television and go talk about something else because everybody knows what they're getting every day of the week, right? In politics, we don't know what we're getting every day of the week, and if everything's the economy's great, nobody's fighting with each other, we're all pulled out of wars and everything like that, and we got plenty of money in the bank. How do you create 24 hours of news out of that?
Yeah, you don't. Yeah. I want to go back to AOC for a moment because I think this is where a lot of people mistake. So the aspect of intellectual property research and development, yep. and we did this at Silent Circle. I ran the session. I'm like, okay, give me your craziest idea that you believe can happen.
Right. Because
then it gets us all talking. It may not start with that, but now we're going to wind up dissecting it. AOC with the Green New Deal. I applaud her for bringing that out, even if it's not realistic. But at least then it's going to get to a point to where, over time, it'll get to be something from that will wind up being realistic, right? That whole aspect of the Green New Deal would cost more than the current debt that we've got all combined. But it's not that the intent isn't there, but people just want to go and shit all over her for it. But you know what? It's the wrong way. There's something there. They just want to look at every negative part instead of going, again, all right, let's disagree. There's a way of having a positive conflict. In this case, look at what is the intent? The intent is at some point we want to remove our dependency on oil, especially foreign oil. So right. How do we get there?
Right.
And there's multiple ways. I think Dan
Crunch lately when we start talking about players, like in the I think alternative ways to with regards to the whole climate change thing. How quickly or what's the angle of the glide slope that we're on to being completely free from fossil fuels, right? Because that's the end state, right? So, and it's the steeper the gradient, the more expensive it gets, right? So, even if you consider that some of her statements are wildly inaccurate, right? But you said she's getting into the middle of the room, and then are we going to have that discussion about how steep that is, right? And go, this is what we can afford today, but you can't at that point. is when the name calling starts, right? Because if you and this is the media world we live in, that you say, hey, I hear you that yes, we do want to do something about continuing to be cleaner as humans and how we treat the planet, right? Because the planet ultimately will take care of itself, right? And that could be disastrous to humankind. But if you start by this is the only course of action, and base it on some wild statements, that's when things get contentious. If you walk into the room, like if you go on the floor of the Congress, the floor of the House, and you say, hey, I don't necessarily disagree with the Congresswoman from New York, but I think we should do it in another way. How's that going to work out, right?
Not good in today's media.
Well, no, but in today's politics, right? We don't have debates on the House floor and on the Senate floor about ideas anymore.
Mm-mm.
Right? It goes up and it's just, and this is both sides of the aisle. It just turns into this name calling festival, right? And how does that work in your house? How does that work in your business? How does that work when you're out with your friends, having dinner, drinking, eating, doing that? If all of a sudden you everything degrades to we're on either side of a table and we just name call each other, and we get cameras involved so that it can be recorded for posterity.
It's like literally watching politics is now what is they used to have like this the first like reality television show on MTV, which was just like a big huge disaster. I don't even remember the name of it, but basically it was just to see all the different reactions people were going to get. Nothing positive came about it. That's literally politics today. Is just no matter who's up there, it's literally just bashing whoever comes to their mind at that particular time.
No doubt.
Because they're looking to trigger everyone. Like that's really it. They want to trigger the other side, and it works every single time.
Yeah. Well, it's that it's you want people to develop this. You want both sides of the aisle to develop what I call the Pakistan-India collective. So Pakistan has nukes. India has nukes. India has enough nukes to wipe Pakistan out there a lot more than Pakistan the other way around. But India also understands how the jet stream works. So if they launch anything into Pakistan, most of that shit's coming back onto them, right? And so you start saying, hey, look, we all have mutually assured destruction here, and not being cognizant of what's coming back on you and coming back on the citizens, that's really what's driving the bad behavior, right? And, there's money involved in it, right? And there's everything else. But at the end of it, like when we get back to the thing, it's like I think more than ever, you can always look and find an example of bad behavior by somebody that people look up to, elected officials, where people get out there and they're like, well, hey, they're doing it. This is okay, right? This is good behavior, right? Because hey, that person got elected to public office and they're making their bones in their job, like their chosen profession, by basically just hammering the other side and saying whatever you say is dumb, right? And you kind of like joke around about it, but it's like most of the people in Congress are career lawyers, career politicians, right? You look at the leadership of both sides. I mean, they probably average been in their respective elected positions for 2 to 3 decades. Right, and they're not in danger of getting unelected, right? And it gives you a lot of safety to be able to, say whatever you want without fear of recrimination.
Yeah, and I just go right back to, I think there should be term limits on all of them, Supreme Court all the way to people in Congress. Like, sorry, you can just only be here for so long.
And I don't disagree with that, right? But this is what I'll say. It's the same thing with any of the other amendments we have, right? Is all right. I hear that, and let's convene the Constitutional Congress and run that through the system, right? And change the Constitution. We've done it 27 times, right? Let's do it 28, right? Again, I say that because we are trying to legislate our way around our rights.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, right? Absolutely.
Because the founders were genius in their thought that we don't want future politicians to be prisoners of the moment and be able to change things on a whim. Because if somebody, you get a despot in there, it fuels that bad thing. Whether it doesn't matter, what any of our rights are. Everybody picks on the Second Amendment, right? Because it's easy to do. But every argument I'd have with somebody about the Second Amendment, it goes down with like, well, hey, I if you feel that strongly about it, go to your congressman, go to your senator, and say, let's get a constitutional Congress together to change the Second Amendment. Right? We have the power to do it. And the reaction I get almost exclusively is like, well, 75% of Americans will never agree to get rid of guns. Okay, then right now you're telling yourself it can't be done because the will of the people is not there. And that's with any of our rights, constitutional rights that we have. Right? People, one of the other hot button is abortion. And you look at when people run for office now, they're like, oh, they're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. You have a legal right to abortion. You have a constitutional right to one. Right? And again, I can say I'm against abortion, I'm for abortion or whatever, but if I'm against it and it really is tearing me up that badly, then go get your elected officials and get the law changed. Right? Well, currently there's not enough support to do that. And the disingenuous piece of it when we start talking about trigger words is there are not enough, like the president can't unilaterally change that. If you get Congress, even now, if you had the other side of the argument and said, hey, we want to get rid of that, well, do you think that they're going to go against the will of the people that much? Right? No, that's the balance that we need to have. And we live so in the moment now that we can't, and we also live for points. Right? Well, yesterday I got beat up in the media, so today I got to beat you up in the media. Well, yesterday you got beat up in the media because you had a dumb idea and you voiced it. Yeah. I got beat up in a meeting because I had a dumb idea and I voiced it. Right? I didn't know. It's small or large, right? I had a dumb idea. With my kids, and one of them held me accountable for it. Right? I don't like all of that stuff. But people don't think in things. They just go, "Hey, we're going to boil the ocean today, and everything that our side thinks is messed up, we're going to go change it in one day." It doesn't work that way, and it doesn't work that way by design. And if you, as an American, think that process, that constitutional process that we have to legislate and to make changes to the fabric of who we are as Americans is wrong, I don't want my kids to go to school where your kids go to school because they're not learning the correct things, right? And I think to kind of cap on this, how we especially how our young people today are talking about things. They have social studies now, right? We, largely posted, we have social studies. How many kids are learning civics, right? If you don't fully functional at how the government works, it's easy to say, hey, anybody can be in charge, right? Do we have to make kids understand good behavior? And yes, you have to listen to people you disagree with, right? And you have, when you see something that is abhorrent, you have to call it out. Right? In this country, we primarily look at it as, race, all those things, right? That you have to call it out, and you have to call evil, and people that cover it up, you need to call them out too, right? And it happens all over the place, right? But to then not have, a whole generation of Americans understand how the mechanisms of government work allows the bad behavior we see on television every day.
Absolutely. I'm going to, because I know you got some basketball you got to watch here soon. One of the points I wanted to also bring up, and I'll ask is, if some random person on the street comes up to you and says, hey, I don't love you, how's that going to affect you? But if you're,
I would probably, I get that, but it doesn't.
But if your significant other says, I don't love you anymore, that's going to affect you.
Right, because there's an emotional connection. Right. And that's where that makes it tough, right? It does. It makes it every day of the week. Those are the hard things, right? But I think the way to counter that is if somebody comes up on the street and says, I don't love you, and goes, well, that's too bad because I love you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you could do that also, but I just go, someone that's not a part of my circle, you can't affect me with anything you say. Correct. The people that are part of that, Look, if the missus were to say, "I want a divorce," even though things have been, if things, in the previous marriages, things were bad. That aspect of divorce, it still affects you tremendously because you had that person was still a part of your circle.
Correct.
Until and that's so some person that you don't care about, if they say something, why are you going to let that trigger you? There's nothing. Was no bond. So
right.
Laugh or do exactly your part, which is, well, that's too bad because
around, right?
Yeah.
I think again, like there's some, there's a certain extent, like that kind of behavior. There's a underlying core of self-loathing that, I think you slow that down. How you react or respond to it, but and not negatively responding. But there's no response, and then there's a positive response, right? And the positive response is usually the one that's like, now they came up to get a reaction out of you, and when you didn't give it to them, you not only didn't give them the reaction they wanted, you said something that was antithetical to where they were at, and you're like, well, I'm going to go over here now.
Yeah.
I gotta think. I'm in overload. Like all the circuits are starting to get hot. My processor's at 88% of max capacity, and things are starting to slow down. Right. That's the reaction I want from people. Is I want you to think.
Mm-hmm.
Right. When I get up and speak, I will say things that are controversial sometimes, not because I want to incite people, because I want you to think about something differently than you showed up at. And I think we talked about this before, but like a lot of times people ask me about SEAL stuff, and they're like, "What's the most difficult thing you've ever done?" And they expect some story about combat, right? And my thing is always like, hey, standing next to a casket while a mother cries over her son, that is the hardest thing I've ever done. Going into a front door and telling someone's wife that their husband is never coming home, that's the hardest thing I've ever done.
And then the next one would be mentoring me. So that's...
Hey, it's why you went in the liquor business, so I can start drinking early. Okay, this is gonna be expensive for TK. I gotta help him out a little bit.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I mean, those are the things. It's when you start getting down to that level. It's when all of a sudden you're having to do something like stand next to a person who's grieving like that, knowing that in some way, in some capacity, you were involved.
Yeah, but I think there makes kind of a great analogy, like when a lot, if you look at, especially like in personal relationships, when somebody comes at you like that, or somebody you really don't know that well, but they get very aggressive with you verbally or whatever, emotionally, right? Because there's an emotional thing that they've got. It's like, okay, where did that come from? Like, where's the baggage? What's the thing? How can I help, like, kind of push that away, right? Because I think mental illness and mental health issues, they happen in the darkness a lot, right? And it's one of the things is, especially dudes, like, nobody's going to talk about it. Like, I got to be strong. I got to do this. Well, hey, things don't work out well every day of the week, right? How am I going to manifest that? How am I going to deal with that, right? And are you not a tough guy because you're thinking, say, look, I'm not okay, right? And who am I going to talk to? Who am I going to talk to about that? Right. The problem is, I think when people are struggling emotionally, mental state, all the mental health stuff, and they go to somebody that they assume they can trust, and that person rejects that, they're like, oh, that's not that big a deal. Well, that's not that big a deal to you because you've not walked this piece of the road. Rather than saying, all right, let me listen. I want to know if there's a way I can help, because I always ask people, is there a way I can help? Not like, how can I help you? Right? Because I don't know if I can help you. Yeah. But I want to throw it out there because there's ways to talk to people to close them off more, right? And you come across like I'm going to jump in. I'm going to fix your problem. Well, I don't know if I can fix your problem. I don't even know. How can I help you, right? I want you to define the terms of my assistance, because in something like that, I think everybody to one extent or another, whether you recognize it or not, has struggled with their emotions, with their mental state and everything over the course of their life, right? And I would say like the number one thing that makes it worse is when people don't acknowledge that it's bad,
Sure.
right? That you're not in a great position, right? How's the easiest way to make it worse and push it deeper underground? And then, a lot of times you'll get, well, I just thought, I didn't think it was a big deal. Well, on a normal day, do I come out and say, hey, I'm struggling with this? No, normally I'm the guy that's going, hey, how can I help you? And if you come out and say, hey, you're struggling, somebody they blow it off or they don't take it seriously because they think, well, it's not really that big a deal. He'll figure it out. She'll figure it out. That's where really bad behavior happens.
Oh yeah, sure.
Right? And you push people into that being part of the 22, right? Yep. And we don't want to be in that group.
Right, absolutely. So I can tell you a funny thing that I've started trying to do here. And so since all of us are in jiu-jitsu here, whenever the miss is like, all right, we're going to do this, I'm like, we're going to roll for it.
See, how did you know that?
Well, in terms of like, oh, you need to do the dusting. I'm like, no, whoever wins doesn't have to do the dusting.
You're a bad person. You are a bad person. I love you to death, but you're a bad person. I really, it's like, come on.
Well, the whole point, I was like, hey, maybe, because I was going to New York. I'm like, and I said to her, do you and the kids go to jiu-jitsu? No. And I'm like, must not want to take it as seriously as what I do. Because when I got back, I went, so yesterday, I was like, Friday night, I said, okay, tomorrow morning, back-to-back private lessons. You should be at the 7:30 one. I'll be at the 7. If you don't, then I'm doing 2. I'll have 2 lessons then. I'm perfectly fine with it. I'll do an hour instead of a half hour. So because the missus didn't want to get up early enough for something like that. I'm like, 7:30. She's like, shouldn't be a problem. So now she's like, you got to dust, and I'm like, well, the mats are right downstairs.
You're a bad man. You are bad.
She said it's not fair. It's like, you could take private lessons too. You could go to class. She does quite well, but she's still very nervous overall. She's never done anything like this. Or even thinking about a violent act is just not in. Right. So
I'm pretty much the same way. I'm sort of a pacifist when it comes to all this stuff.
Exactly. All right, my friend. Well, you have a great week.
You as well.
And we will talk soon. All right, everyone out there, take care and bye.
Have a great week, everyone.